Hey folks, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I want to show you one trick to give your mix more atmosphere by using what I like to call the verb guitar. We're going to be looking at one of my favorite things to give a mix more depth today and give it some atmosphere, but before we dive in, if you are ready to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF that will walk you through the entire mixing process, step by step, to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any more of the hassle and without any more of the guesswork. It is a completely free guide, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and talk about what I like to call the verb guitar. So this is the verb guitar here. You can see it's this stereo guitar track. It was actually just a mono guitar track, and all I really did was flip it to stereo here. But before we get too much into the technical stuff here, let me play you what the mix is sounding like, and then I want to solo up this guitar so you can hear the finished product that we're going for with this guitar here. So here's our finished mix for this song.
Wait, it'll be a little longer. She's coming for you. She'll get here fast as she can. Just wait, gotta be a little stronger. You'll make it all through. Don't lose sight of her head. Wait, it'll be.
So you can hear our mix feels really full. It feels nice and big, nice and wide, and it has some nice depth and some atmosphere to it is the way I like to put it. And those are due to things like, well, the pad here and of course the verb guitar. So let me solo up the verb guitar. You probably didn't pick it out in the mix by itself. It's pretty subtle, but it's something I like to tuck in there because it does add this kind of atmosphere to a mix. So take a listen. Here's the verb guitar by itself. So it's just this really high guitar part, drenched in reverb, rolled off a little bit, and we're tucking it underneath the mix here to give it some extra vibe. So before we get into the technical parts of creating this, let me show you what it does for our mix here. So I'm going to mute our lead vocal here, and I'm just going to A-B just this verb guitar, and I want you to see if you can hear our mix changing. This is one of those instruments that you don't want to hear in the mix, you want to feel in the mix. I'm going to do this one more time here. I just want you to feel it, okay? Listen to the difference when I take this verb guitar out. Listen to how flat and how one-dimensional the mix feels. And then when I kick it back in, you get some depth, and it makes the mix feel more, it feels a little bit dreamier, right? It has some vibe, it has some character to it. So we'll start with it, and then I'm going to take it out. If you want to close your eyes and see if you can tell when it disappears. The mix just changes depth-wise and feel-wise here. To me, it's one of those instruments that takes the song from feeling like, you know, a bunch of musicians playing together to an actual song, right? So instead of just a bunch of tracks going at the same time, it blends, it glues everything together to make it feel like a song. So how are we creating this verb guitar here? Like I said, it's just an actual mono guitar part. It's just a really high played guitar part here. And then what I've done here is I've just used one of Studio One's functions, the channel mode, and I've just switched it to a stereo channel. But here, if I hit play without the plugins on, you'll hear it's still just a mono guitar, but sitting on a stereo channel here. So it's still just a mono guitar signal, but I flipped it to a stereo track. So when I put the reverb on, we'll get a stereo reverb instead of a mono reverb. That's where we're going to get that depth and that kind of atmospheric sound from. So going into our reverb plugin here, I've actually just grabbed one of the presets here inside of Studio One's reverb. Just grabbed the concert hall here, and I've just trimmed it back to about 49% here on the mix. So I'm going to go all the way up here, and then we'll go back down to 49%. So you can hear the full effect of the reverb, and as we trim it back, you'll hear how that blend kind of sits to make it feel a little bit smoother, and you can hear the instrument a little bit more. It's not so drenched sounding. So it's just a large hall reverb, a little bit of pre-delay on it, so it feels like you're kind of sitting in the hall and this guitar is echoing through the hall. Down at 49% here where I settled, just felt the realest to me. The trick to get it set right is pretty much to go all the way, so drench it in reverb where it sounds just absolutely atrocious and absolutely a mess. And just pull that mix knob back till it's sitting at a place where when you close your eyes, you can kind of picture that guitarist up on the stage playing this guitar part and it's echoing through that big concert hall. If it feels real, it's going to give you that atmospheric vibe in the mix. Now the next thing we're doing here is just a little bit of EQ to trim it up and clean it up a little bit. I don't like so much low end coming from something like this, whether it's a pad or the Verb guitar like this. I usually like to trim out all the low end and usually some of the low mid area too. So I'm pulling this high pass filter up to about 350 hertz here. So trimming off all of the low end. And then we've got a little cut here, about a 4 dB cut. Where are we at? 486 hertz. So pulling out some of that mid range and some of this higher low mid area, some of that 400. That can get a little bit muddy, and we don't want to add mud with this, right? Especially with it drenched in reverb. Something like this can get really muddy really fast and start to make your mix feel too heavy. I don't want to make it feel heavy. I want to make it feel a little bit dreamier and a little bit more atmospheric, so give it some depth. And drenching something like this in reverb that's like a really high part, you'll get some ringing frequencies. So these are a couple notches up here, just pulling out some things that were ringing. And then I've rolled off some of the top end here, some of the super, super highs, so it's not so harsh sounding. You can hear that really high-tuned guitar part. It gets a little bit prickly up on the top end. And with the reverb on, some of those things bounce around a little bit too much, so I'm just etching that back a little bit. I will A-B this for you, and I'll pull up some of these boosts so you can hear the range we're affecting here. We'll start without it, and then I'll kick it in for you. You can hear it feels a little bit smaller with the EQ in, but it's one of those funny things that when you're mixing, sometimes things that feel small by themselves have a big effect on the mix, and things that feel big by themselves tend to get dwarfed or mess with your mix a little bit. So I'm going to throw this back in the mix now, still without our vocals, so you can hear it and pay attention to it a little bit more. It's something that's hard to hear inside the mix. You really feel it though when it disappears. You could hear there with the EQ though, we're really trimming off all of that kind of low end energy and that prickly stuff up on the top end. And then just a couple notches and a couple cuts there in the middle to clean it up a little bit and pull out some of those ringing frequencies, some of those whistling tones on something that's this high and this drenched in reverb. So going back into our mix here, I'll A-B it one more time for you, and I'll A-B it with the plugins as well. So I'll take the reverb and the EQ off, and you can hear how it changes in the mix a little bit as well. Without the reverb and stuff, you can actually pick out the actual instrument inside the mix. Once you throw that reverb, once you throw that EQ on, you kind of just hear a song as a whole. It's one of those instruments for me that glues everything together. So without it, you can kind of sit here and pick out, oh, those electric guitars sound cool, the acoustic guitar sounds cool, I like the piano part, but you throw this Verb guitar in, and suddenly everything blends together and it feels like a song. I hope that was helpful for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can download it below to start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.